أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه، وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم حبب إلينا الإيمان وزينه في قلوبنا، وكره إلينا الكفر والفسوق والعصيان، واجعلنا من عبادك الراشدين. All praise is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and peace and blessings be upon His beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Continuing with the Khilaf of Uthmaan ibn Affan radiyallahu anhu, the Nurayn, and we've been spoken about the different effects or reasons for the fitna that took place during the end or the second half of the Khilaf of Uthmaan ibn Affan radiyallahu anhu. The first half of his Khilafah was peace, tranquility, no real issues. Towards the second half of his Khilafah, as Imam al-Zuhri, he says, the trials and tribulations, the fitna, the seeds began to be planted for the fitna to take place during the time of Uthman. And there are many reasons behind it. Some of that is internal, which returns to the Muslims themselves and the state that they had reached at that time after the death of the Prophet ﷺ, and being away from the Prophet ﷺ and not being taught and nurtured by the Prophet ﷺ like the early Sahaba they were, and the opening of the dunya upon them, and the lavish lifestyle, and the different things that affected a lot of the Muslimin, whether the newcomers or those who entered into Islam during the last stages of the life of the Prophet ﷺ. So all of this had an effect upon the society and the ummah at that time. The ummah at that time. And the large expansion, which we will begin with today, which is the nature of the social change. Yani the large expansion that took place during the time of Uthman radiyallahu anhu, where the Muslim borders reached to beyond today what we call Iran and Iraq and the lands beyond it, and to the west, northern Africa. Egypt had become one of the centers, the large cities of the Muslimin, which, as we'll come to see, those who killed Uthman in his house, the majority of them were from Egypt, were Egyptian, from Egyptian origins. In Asham, you had the big cities in Asham. In Iraq today, what we know as Iraq today was also known as Iraq back then, Al-Kufa wal-Basra. So you had these large cities in which there were centers of the Muslimin, and the people are going out. They were the centers in which the armies would be sent out to fight for the battles and so forth, and they would return. They would return with the numbers that went. They would return with less than they had gone with from the original number, but with more from the opened lands. So the army would go out, for instance 10,000, a large number of that army would pass away during the land or during the time of jihad, but a large number would return from the actual open cities and the open lands at that time. So the mixing of the cultures, the different customs, ideas, beliefs, languages and so forth, this all bring forth a society and a time frame in which it's accepting for fitna. Because when the society is weak, like today, like society today, and that's why we always try to learn history, so that we can try and not fall into that which the people before us they fell into. It's a lesson. The society, when it's accepting of fitna, when it's accepting of rumors, and it's accepting of trials, and it's accepting of spreading fitna. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said in the hadith, al-fitnatu na'ima, la'ana Allahu man ayqadhaha. Fitna is asleep. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He curses the one who wakes it up, who brings it forward, who plants the seeds for it. He's cursed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because fitna is asleep. So when you have a society, a community that is accepting of rumors, is accepting of talking about someone like Uthman radiallahu anhu. Imagine you have someone whom you look up to very much, your sheikh in the society, a scholar, a righteous person, you look up to them and so forth, you know who they are. If someone comes and talks about them, or if someone comes and spreads rumors about them, to you, those rumors have no effect, because you know them, you've lived with them, you've been around them for so long, you know the history, you know, for instance, with regards to Uthman radiallahu anhu, the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. That's why, subhanallah, the ulama, they say that there was not a single companion that took part in the fitnah of Uthman. And even when it came, as some narrations mentions, the son of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, when he entered upon Uthman radiallahu anhu looked at him, he said, "You are not the one who will kill me." Because he was a companion. He said, "You are not the one who will kill me." And then he spoke to him words, and Abu Bakr, his son, he walked out of the house of Uthman with his head down and he ran away. And he turned away. So not one companion took part in the fitnah of Uthman. Why? Because they knew Uthman radiallahu anhu. They didn't accept any of the rumors that were spread about Uthman radiallahu anhu. They had received the hadith that the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he mentions that Uthman will be killed as being oppressed, and in a position of being oppressed. So they understood. That's why when we look at the nature of the social changes, all these different languages, cultures, customs, beliefs, creeds and understandings and intentions, hidden intentions against the Muslimin and so forth, you can't control it. You can't control it. And this is what brought forth to the accepting of fitnah. The accepting of fitnah. And the accepting of plotting and planning against someone like Uthman radiallahu anhu. Someone like Uthman radiallahu anhu. Now when we look at the demographics in society, who was around at that time? From the people, what were their numbers? The first is the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. They were the, if we can say, one of the main numbers in the society at that time. But their numbers were decreasing slowly. One, due to the fact that they were getting old, death. Two, due to the fact that they were those who were on the front lines. They were on the front lines, they were in the path of jihad, they were fighting fi sabilillah, they were out there fighting. In Egypt itself, in the famine that took place in Asham itself, the Sahaba were there. They were out on the front lines. So due to the fact of jihad, and then due to the fact that they had spread out into the different cities. So you had a couple in Al-Kufa, you had a couple in Al-Basra, you had some in Asham, you had some in Egypt, some in Northern Africa, some in Palestine. So they were what? They were spread out. Even though they were there, but they were vastly outnumbered by the inhabitants who were living there. By the inhabitants who were living there. And imagine to the extent where, during the time of Ali radiallahu anhu, Sa'id ibn Zayd, one of the 10 Mubashirin bil Jannah, he enters upon the masjid of Al-Kufa. And Al-Mughira bin Shu'bah radiallahu anhu is giving a lesson in the masjid, Al-Jami', the large masjid. So a man walks in and he begins cursing some of the Sahaba. And the companion is not able to do anything. And he's not able to stand up and do anything. So Sa'id ibn Zayd, he comes to Al-Mughira and he says, Al-Mughira, aren't you going to do anything? He says, what can I do? We are outnumbered. We are outnumbered. We're not able to do anything. And that's when he testifies, Sa'id ibn Zayd said, I testify that those who you have mentioned, because they mentioned Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali, and they mentioned the Sahaba, Talha wa Zubayr, Abdurrahman ibn Auf and so forth. He says, I testify by Allah that they have been given the glad tidings of Jannah. And he mentioned the 9. And he said, and I will name you the 10th if you want to. So Mughira said, who was the 10th? He said, I was the 10th. I was the 10th, Sa'id ibn Zayd radiallahu anhu, who was given the glad tidings of Jannah. So the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, not being able to what? To have that effect. They had effect on those who sat around them. They had effect on those who came to them. They had effect on those who attended the lessons, attended the different gatherings in the masjid and so forth. It had an effect on them. Like today, if there's a person who's not attending something at least, or who's not going and learning of someone at least, you find that they're not going to what? They're not going to advance. They're not going to advance. It's always been a teacher-student. It's always been a teacher-student, even if it's something which is so small. But as long as you have that effect from someone who is there. Like the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. The Sahaba, the ones who spent more time with the Prophet ﷺ, they are the ones that what? They are the ones that shined. They are the ones that were given the glad tidings of Jannah. They were the ones who did those major changes in society. They were the ones who were mentioned. Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali, Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, Abu Darda, Abu Dhar, Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah, and so forth. Why were they mentioned? Why? Because they tried as much as they can to be next to the Prophet ﷺ, so the effect was more on them because they were around him so much. The second category, or the second group of people, is the original inhabitants of the conquered regions. The Muslimin, when they enter upon a region and they conquer a region, that region in itself falls under the what? The rule of the Muslimin. Now that region, or those people in those regions, they are different levels. Some of them, they accept and they pay jizya. They pay the tax upon them to the Muslimin, to the Khalifa, and they live under the protection of the Muslimin, which is what we call Ahlul Dhimma, the people of protection, those who live under what? The Islamic rule. And you had those who entered into Islam sincerely. Those who entered into Islam sincerely. And you had those who entered into Islam, but they hid in their heart hatred for Islam. So they have two options here. Either we pay taxes, or we get kicked out of our land, or we become Muslim. Like the Munafiqeen. Why did the Munafiqeen come to light in Medina? Why was there no Munafiqeen in Mecca? Why wasn't there any Munafiqeen in Mecca? Only Medina. Because there was no advantages of being a Muslim in Mecca. There was no advantage of being a Muslim in Mecca. To them at least, worldly advantage. There was no advantage to being a Muslim, a believer in Mecca. In Mecca, if you were a believer, straight away you were what? You were fought against. Straight away you were scrutinized. Straight away you were boycotted by your family. Straight away in Mecca was hardship. In Mecca it wasn't a privilege, dunya-wise, to be a what? To be a believer. But when Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam moved to Medina, established the Khilafah, now there's a what? Now there's an advantage of being a believer. Now there's what? Everyone's moving to Medina. The Muslimin, they're bringing their wealth to Medina. The Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he is the leader in Medina. So now there's a privilege. Now there's an advantage to being a believer. That's where the Munafiqeen, they come to light. They showed Islam on the outside, but they what? They hid kufr and hatred and disbelief on the inside. And that's where these people, the original inhabitants of the conquered regions, came into play. And why were they, and why were these people more accepting of fitnah? Or why were these people quick to engage in the fitnah? There's many points to mention. First and foremost, the ignorance in the deen. The ignorance in the deen, in the teachings of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They knew into Islam. They knew into the teachings of Islam. They knew to the Qur'an, to the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's why you find a lot of new Muslims, if they hasten into these matters, they can go in deep, and they can be, or they can mention certain things that are not accepted, or their mind can be played with easily. Their mind could be played with easily. That's why they come to a, for instance, they come to a river, sister, you have to do this, you have to do that. The male, he tells her, but we have to do this, you have to do that, you have to, and she's thinking what? She's thinking that's Islam. She's thinking this person here, he's a copy-paste of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When he's the opposite. But why? Because they accept straight away. They're not able, to a person, as they call a veteran Muslim who's been around for years, born Muslim man, comes to him, tries to do the same thing, go try and روح ضحك على غيري. Or he tries to tell it to an Arab sister, كذا, she tell him, go find someone else to play these games on. Why? Because they know that this person, what he's talking is not true. That's why the original inhabitants, they were quick to what? They were quick to engage in this. Why? Because those who planted these seeds, they made it look so nice. And we want the haqq. We want the truth. We want justice. We want justice to prevail. We want the Islam. And they'll bring you verses. They'll bring you verses as much as you want. They'll bring you a hadith as much as you want. And this person, these new people to Islam, they begin to engage with it. So ignorance in the matters of the deen, the lack of understanding of Islam due to the language barriers. The person will come and he wants to debate with you about certain matters in fiqh or in kada, and he'll come, wants to debate, you tell him, translate for me this hadith. He says, I don't know language, I don't know Arabic, I don't know kada. So the language barrier, not being able to understand the original text, not being able to open the Qur'an and read it, you're depending upon the translation of someone. You're depending upon the translation and where that person is translating that text for you. Where that person is translating. Once a brother, subhanAllah, very easy. Once a brother, subhanAllah, he brought me a hadith. He goes to me, he had some associates who were Rawafid, who were Shia, and they had brought him text from Bukhari and Muslim, translated into English, about certain things, about Aisha radiallahu anha and so forth. And he brought me these texts, and he brought the translated. They sent him the translated version. I'm looking at the translation, like, this is not correct. This is not right, doesn't sound right. So looked up the ahadith in Arabic, in Bukhari and Muslim, looked up the hadith in Arabic, and it had nothing to do with what they had mentioned. They had changed the text, translated to what fits their intention, to what fits their agenda. And that's how they play with the minds of people. That's how they play with the minds of people. And that's why nahna, inshallah, when we start to talk about Ali radiallahu anhu and the khilafah of Ali, and we go into depth with Ali radiallahu anhu, we'll come to understand that because they attack Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. They attack the people of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Why don't you love Ali radiallahu? Why don't you kada? We love Ali more than you love Ali. We have respect for him more than you have respect for him. But it's the fact that they drill that into the people. They drill it into them. And they don't this, they don't that, they don't mention that and that. And then the people they understand. And I've had many people who, subhanAllah, have been affected by that. Some groups, as we mentioned, amongst them entered Islam outwardly, but inwardly they had just to get out of paying jizya or to get out of death and so forth, they would outwardly pronounce Islam, but on the inside they are plotting and planning against the Muslimin. And they are trying to see how they can go against the Muslimin. People of whims and desires, they were relying on these groups to stir up trouble and incited them accordingly. The people are waiting for these type of people to jump on them and to direct them how they want. That's why you will always find that these people are always what? They're always directed by someone in charge. There's always someone what? There's always someone directing them. There's always someone telling them, go left, they go left. Go right, they go right. Go straight, they go straight. Stop, they stop. There's always someone in the background who is what? Who is in charge and takes advantage of their weakness. The third category are the Bedouins. The Bedouins, the Arab Bedouins at that time, who were living in the different desert areas, who were famous for what? Who were famous for their Arabic language, their ability to memorize. Their ability to memorize. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, subhanallah, in the Quran, He mentions the A'rab. They are called the A'rab, the Bedouins. He says, Al-A'rabu ashaddu kufran wa nifaqan wa ajdaru alla ya'lamu hudud Allah. أو حدود ما أنزل الله على رسوله والله عليم حكيم. He says the Bedouins are the worst in disbelief. The Bedouins, they are the worst in disbelief and hypocrisy, and more likely to be in ignorance of the limits of Allah's commands and His legal laws which Allah has sent to His messenger. And Allah is all knower, all wise. This is because the Bedouins were hard-hearted. They were very stern. They were very harsh in these matters. That's why the Bedouin, when he saw the Prophet ﷺ kissing the head of a child in Medina, he came to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, "You kiss your children's head, use merciful towards your children." He said, "Yes." He says, "I have such and such children. I've never taken my child, never hugged him, never kissed him, never done anything to him." For Nabi ﷺ, he says, "What can I do to someone that Allah has taken the mercy out of his heart?" And if you own child, you can't be merciful towards them. If you own blood, you can't be merciful towards. Who are you going to be merciful towards? And they're very what? They're very harsh. They're very stern. They're very hard-hearted. That's why when they disbelieve with what? That's why the A'rab, they were the ones that when the hadith mentioned them, the A'rabi, he would walk into the masjid, look around, where's the Prophet ﷺ? The Sahaba will tell him, that's the Prophet ﷺ. And he came to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, "Prophet of Allah, I'm going to ask you questions and I'm going to be firm and harsh in my questioning." Hadith al-Sahih. I'm going to ask you questions and I'm going to be firm and harsh in my questioning. So Nabi ﷺ, knowing where he's from, he said, "Ask." And the hadith goes on. He says, I ask you by the one who created the heavens and the earth together, did Allah order you to order us to pray 5 times? He said, "Yes." So I'm going to pray 5 times, and so forth. And then Siyam, Zakat and Hajj, and so forth. But they were what? They were hard-hearted. They had firm and stern hearts. So they didn't have the knowledge of the limits of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he was one that said, "Pray 5 times." Said, "Pray 5 times." I'm going to pray 5 times, that's it. Zakat, the nisab is such and such, only pay zakat. Siyam, Ramadan, only Ramadan. Hajj is once, if I'm able to, once, that's it. I'm not going to do anything else. That's all I'm going to do. Nothing else. Nabi ﷺ, when he walked away, he said, that's what's ordered? He said, "Yes." And then he walked away and said, "That's all I'm going to do." What did the Prophet ﷺ say? He said, "دخل الجنة إن صدق." He said, he'll enter Jannah if he's truthful. If he upholds the rights of Islam, he does that which he's ordered to do, and he is firm upon them, and he remains on them, he will enter Jannah. He will what? He will enter Jannah. But he has to be firm on them. He has to be firm on them. So they were also inclined to what? They were also inclined to engage into the fitnah due to their lack of understanding of Islam. That's why anywhere you go, where you have the village people, the people who live away from the cities and so forth, they always have their own what? Their own mentality. They have their own way of thinking. They have their own customs. They have their own traditions and so forth. And a lot of the times this can come in what? In contradiction to the deen. In contradiction to the deen. So when there's lack of understanding of Islam, this contradiction cannot be solved. Because you have to give up. You have to leave. You have to leave that which you what? That which you used to do for that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordained, that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordered. Also they would what? They were quick to develop self-admiration as soon as they learned anything of the Qur'an. believing that he had become a scholar when he acquired a little knowledge. And this is like a lot of the people today. A lot of the people today acquires some verses, memorizes Juz' Amma, very good, mashallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you, inshallah you memorize the whole Qur'an. And then even if you do memorize the whole Qur'an, that doesn't make you a scholar. That doesn't make you an imam. That doesn't put you in a position higher than you are in. There's a difference between memorization and between understanding. I can bring you hundreds, thousands of memorizers of the Qur'an and they can't understand one word. They can't understand one word. You go to many countries overseas, Turkey, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, the European countries, hundreds, thousands of memorizers of the Qur'an. They don't understand one word from the Qur'an. The only thing they probably understand is Lafzul Jalala, whenever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioned, or some small words. So when they gain self-admiration, like today, subhanallah, repeats itself, history repeats itself. They gain a couple of knowledge, a bit of knowledge, which is beautiful, alhamdulillah, and they sit with the shaykh for a bit, and then they start to find themselves They start to find themselves, and he wants to debate the shaykh. He wants to debate his teacher now. And he wants to go against his teacher, thinking that khilaf in minor matters, in furu' is something which is frowned upon. So no, you have to follow that which I follow. I believe. This is the word I think, I believe, I follow. The I word, this has destroyed societies. This has destroyed families. The I word, I think, I this, I that. Where'd you study, brother? Who'd you study under? Who was the scholar? Who was the sheikh? Where's your lineage of ilm? How long did you sit under the sheikh for? How long did you gather? I read the books on my own. You're a bigger threat than many people out there. That's why the ulama, they warned against the book scholar. The book scholar, the one who goes and reads books, and then comes and says, "Oh, no, I've learned." One of the students came to one of the ulama, and he said to the sheikh, I read a book in Usul called Al-Mustasfa for Imam Al-Ghazali, rahimahullah ta'ala, which is one of the main books of Usul fiqh in Hanbali, Maliki and Shafi'i madhab. Al-Mustasfa for Imam Al-Ghazali. He said, I read Al-Mustasfa, which is not too big, it's 2 volumes. I read Al-Mustasfa. So the Shaykh, he goes to him, said, beautiful, who did you read it on? He said, no one, I read it myself. He said, then you didn't read it. He said, then you didn't read it. He said, if you do think you read it, then forget what you understood, for you understood it wrong. You have to have a Shaykh. You have to have someone to study under. So self-admiration, and I think that this, I think that that, Yahi, come read from the Qur'an. He opens the Qur'an, he can't read. Yahi, go learn how to read the Qur'an. Go learn how to read the hadith. Go learn how to read the Arabic language, the language of the text, the language of the deen. And then come and we're able to sit down and have a niqash. Self-admiration, this is a destroying factor in many societies, even today. The disrespect towards the scholars and reluctance to learn from them or follow the example. Subhanallah, any sheikh you tell them, nah, but his aqeedah is not correct. Nah, but his madhab, I don't agree with his madhab. Nah, but his opinions, they're all over the place. Nah, who told you this? Ana ma'ajabni. He said something, I didn't like it. He mentioned something, he didn't like it. He had a certain position in a certain matter, I didn't like it, so khalas, I X'd it. Then you come to the next one, same thing, next one, all you find is a sheikh who's thousands of miles across the sea, that he watches videos on YouTube, that he has no connection to, face to face. That's my sheikh. He's my sheikh. He has no connection to, doesn't study of him face to face. Not asking him questions, I watch his videos. Beautiful, benefit from him, take from him. But you need to be what? You need to sit down, face to face, on your knees, learning of them, taking of them, taking of those who what? Of those who, Imam al-Dhahabi rahimahullah ta'ala, in his famous book Siyar A'lam al-Nubala, he mentioned these people. He mentioned them, he said it's like a bird that's trying to fly and it hasn't even grown its feathers yet. It's featherless, but it's trying to what? It's trying to fly. Is it going to fly? It's not going to fly. It's like the chicken that thought that he could what? The chicken that thought that he could fly. So it kept on jumping off the roof, boom. Next day it'll come up, jump off the roof again, and it'll fall straight to the ground. Next day it'll go up again, fall straight to the ground. Khalas, you're a chicken. You're a chicken. Don't try to jump. Run, you can run fast, but don't try to jump. Khalas, you don't try to fly. You can't fly. So the disrespect, and the worst thing, wallahi, the worst thing a person can have is disrespect towards the scholars. Let alone disrespect towards the mashayikh around, and respecting him even if you don't believe that he's a scholar or he's an imam or kada. Respecting him for the fact that he knows the Qur'an and the Sunnah, he studied for a couple of years, respecting him for that fact. The dangerous part is when there's disrespect towards the ulama, disrespect towards Imam Abu Hanifa. He rejects hadith, he kada. Wal-'iyadhu billah. So speaking about the ulama with no knowledge, he rejects hadith. He gives preference to qiyas over hadith. MashaAllah annak. You've gone through the whole fiqh of Imam Abu Hanifa and you've come to the conclusion that he gives preference to hadith over qiyas, or qiyas over hadith. You've gone through all the fiqh of Imam Abu Hanifa, and the person probably hasn't even read the book of purification. Doesn't know how to wipe his behind, ajallakumullah. And they want to speak about the ulama, and they want to speak about the fuqaha, and they want to speak about these people who gave their life. Imam Abu Hanifa, he didn't give a lesson. He sat for 20 years learning of his sheikh, learning of his imam, and many others. He had hundreds, some even say thousands of teachers. He didn't sit and give a lesson until he had learned for 20 years. 20 years sitting down and learning. He did 10 years, his sheikh was still alive. His sheikh was still alive. And his sheikh used to give a lesson like this, for instance, in the masjid. So he would study it for 10 years. He goes, you know what, 10 years, I should have, it's alright 10 years. I'll start doing my own lesson. So he walked into the masjid and he sat in the other corner of the masjid. He sat down to give a lesson. He sat down, he saw his sheikh walk into the masjid and sit down in his chair, and the students began to sit around his sheikh. So he looked at the students, started to come to him, to Imam Abu Hanifa, and he got up, he said, no, go to the majlis of Imam Hamad and you sit there. He said, I will never give a lesson as long as he is alive. And he didn't give a lesson until he died, until his sheikh died, which was 10 years. Which was 10 years. Not on wallah, nah, that's it, khalas, enough, I've studied 10 years, I've done 15 years, that's it, I need my own chair. No, he waited until, that's it, there's no need for me to sit. The imam is already there. 20 years learning, studying. Imam Malik, he says, I didn't give fatwa, I didn't give opinions until over 30 of the imams and the tabi'in of Medina gave me accreditation. They said, Imam Malik, oh Malik, you're able to give fatwa. Until the big scholars of Medina gave him permission that he can go and give fatwa. So disrespecting the ulama, that's why, what did the ulama say? The ulama say, Dima'ul ulama'i masmuma. The blood of the ulama is poisoned. If you backbite, you talk about them, you're backbiting and you're eating and you're talking and you're taking in poison. And that's what these people, the Bedouins, they fell into. Straight away they see themselves and nowhere higher than them. Deeply rooted tribalism. They have that tribalism. My tribe, your tribe, their tribe, kada, khalas. They had that deeply in them. The people of whims and desires took advantage of them and their ignorance. And how they took advantage of it. And they had what? They were hot-tempered in nature. aversion to cities and mixing with the inhabitants, and their suspicion of people whom they do not know. And this is the nature of the Bedouins in all times and all places. They're always what? They're always careful, and they don't trust people as much. And their strictness in religious observance and their stubbornness with no knowledge. Hence most of the rebels came from this group. When we look at, if you look into history, the majority of those who rebelled against Uthman were from the Bedouins, were from the Arab. And not only that, the majority of the Khawarij at that time and the time after Uthman and the time of Ali, the majority of them were from the Bedouins, were from the Arab. The Khawarij and those who rebelled, because the rebellion against Uthman came forward with the what? With the also the birth of the Khawarij. It's all connected with one another. There came the two groups. One of the groups that turned Ali radiallahu anhu into a god, wal-'iyadhu billah, and they put him on a pedestal that he's higher than God, wal-'iyadhu billah. And you had those who hated him, those who put him on kufr, those who outrightly said Ali is a kafir, wal-'iyadhu billah. You had the two extremes. Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah is in the middle. Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah is in the middle. We give him what his due respect and his due position in Islam, but we don't exceed it. And the same with all the Sahaba and all those who were around at that time. But the Bedouins, they came out, and from the Bedouins emerged a group called the Qur'an. They were memorizers of the Qur'an. And their memorization of the Qur'an became a burden upon them, because they began understanding the Qur'an according to what? To what they wanted to understand the Qur'an. To what they wanted to understand the Qur'an. Khalas, it got stuck in their mind. A small example, and we'll go in more detail when we speak about Ali. To them, khalas, وَمَنْ لَمْ يَحْكُمْ بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهِ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْكَافِرُونَ. Whoever doesn't judge or rule by that which Allah has sent, they are kuffar. So they put Ali radiallahu anhu ala al-kufr, Ibn Abbas ala al-kufr, and all those who were around, Mu'adh bin Jabal al-kufr, those who were around Ali radiallahu anhu from the Sahaba radiallahu anhum on kufr. Why? Because they understood that verse, that khalas, that's it. Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma, he went and he debated with them. He was able to bring back to Islam, bring back to the understanding thousands of them. Because he explained to them, no, it's not like that. That's not the understanding. فَمَنْ لَمْ يَحْكُمْ بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهِ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْكَافِرُونَ. This is not tahkim بِغَيْرِ مَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهِ. This is different to that. This is the meaning of it is kada. The meaning of this is giving them the understanding. And they were what? They were well-spoken Arabs, and they still misunderstood. So imagine the one who doesn't know Arabic, the one who thinks he knows Arabic, and then he understands the Qur'an according to his own what? To his own understanding. And the understanding of the people is so weak, which is normal. Your understanding will increase with your increasement of what? Of seeking knowledge. But if you're not going to increase the seeking of knowledge, then your understanding will not increase with it. Also, one of the main fabrics of society at that time were those who had previously apostatized, Ahlul Riddah, from the times of Abu Bakr. A lot of them came back into Islam. Abu Bakr had a strict approach. They are not allowed to be in charge of anyone in the army. They were not even allowed to join the army. Ahlul Riddah. In the time of Abu Bakr, he wrote out a condition, he wrote out an order that none of those who came back from Riddah, none of those who returned from apostatizing, from leaving Islam at that time, none of them is to be any leader of a group in the army, let alone from the army itself. Very strict Abu Bakr. And then the time of Umar came, and he listened. He allowed them to join the army, but they weren't allowed to what? They weren't allowed to be in charge of any group or anything more than 100. That's why during one of the invasions, he was one of the ashab, because those who apostatized and returned, some of them were sincere, some of them had a misunderstanding, was clarified, they came back to Islam, وَصَلُّحَ إِسْلَامُهُمْ, and the Islam returned better than it was before, and a large number of them, they just came back so they don't have to what? So they don't have to pay jizya, so they're not killed, so they're not fought against, and so forth. And they hid animosity towards Islam. Those who they came back to Islam righteously, a lot of them were used in the battles, in the armies, and they weren't allowed to be in charge of more than 100 men. During the time of Umar, they can be in charge of less than 100 men, of a battalion, yani of a group of soldiers, less than 100. So Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah, during one of the battles, he had to send one of them who was very trusted to him, but khalas, the orders were less than 100. He had to send him in chasing of a group, and he had to send with him only 80, because he couldn't send with him more than 100. That same leader, later in the time of Uthman, he was also one of the main campaigners in the north, in the lands beyond Iraq, in Azerbaijan, Armenia and so forth, and he martyred, or he was killed there, and he died as a shaheed and so forth. But what changed during the time of Uthman? Uthman radiallahu anhu became even more lenient. He allowed them to take positions in the army. And khalas, that's it. Hasuna Islamuhum, they wanted to be lenient with them. He wanted to allow them to prove themselves, and a lot of them were dishonest, and a lot of them were hiding animosity towards Islam. That's why in the names mentioned from those who entered upon Uthman the night or the day he was killed, were those, some of them were from Ahlul Riddah. Some of them were from Ahlul Riddah. And they were the ones who had entered also into that time. So the different approach bring forth to what? Bring forth to the allowing of them to take part into the ummah, into the armies and so forth, and then they took advantage of those areas. The cultural fabric as well is something very important. The cultural fabric of society at that time, as we said, you had many cultures entering into Islam. And slowly, in the beginning there was no effect, but slowly that culture begins to what? Begins to change and affect the people. Take example as Australia, as Australia. The culture of the Muslimin, or the culture of the Arabs, is slowly what? Of the Arabs, of many different the subcontinents and so forth, the culture is slowly what? Is slowly disappearing. And that culture, as Arabs and non-Arabs who come from a long Muslim background, a lot of those cultures that we see, those customs that we see, are in line with the deen. They're in line with the deen. Al-urf, the custom, as long as it doesn't contradict with the deen, it's allowed, it's accepted. Al-urf, in the custom, in the sharia, as long as it doesn't contradict the deen, as long as it doesn't go against the deen, then it's allowed, it's accepted. Once it contradicts the deen or it goes against the deen, that's when it's rejected. That's why one of the sources of legislation in usul fiqh is al-urf, is the urf. So the cultures slowly, even now today, slowly that culture is what is disappearing. And which culture is being put in its position or in its place? Not the Muslim culture, not the hukm al-shar'i. What's being put in its place? Western culture. And the cultural fabric, the effect that it has on society, it shows. It shows. One, subhanallah, to show you to what extent. And this is not, a lot of the, as I said, culture is not deen, but it's in line with the deen, and it's in line with what is best for the person. Now we know that when a person wants to get married, the male goes and what? And asks for the girl's hand. Ask for the girl's hand. Normally what happens is the parents go and you sit down and you get to know each other and so forth, and those awkward moments take place. The first time you see her and so forth, you're trying to gaze at her by secret and gather. Naturally, when it happens in that way, Now what's happening is it's becoming the other way around. Now I remember, subhanallah, a couple of years ago. One sister, she called and she said, I've been speaking to this guy for a while and we want to get engaged and so forth, but his parents and him want me and my parents to come to his house. To come to his house and to ask for his hand. MashaAllah. هذا اللي ناقصنا يعني. And they're coming and asking who قاعد, and he's bringing in the tea and the coffee and she's sitting down, and that's what's happening. That's the change that brings forth. The change, the culture. Now what's happening now? Now what do they say to you? Let them get to know each other. Let them go out for a coffee a couple of times. Let them gather, and then once they make the decision, or now what happens is now, the girl, she's already made up her mind. And she's coming and she's informing her father. Not taking the what? Not taking the advice of the father. Not seeing the father, this person, he's interested, what do you think? No. She's coming, she's saying, Dad, the kat maktabs in 2 weeks, you're invited, ahla wa sahla. If you want to come, you can come. If you want to gather, this is an invitation. That's how it's becoming. Wallahi, that's how it's becoming. And that's something small. That's something small. When you get into the aqeedah issues, when you get into the heavy issues that people are starting to reject, people are starting to reject rulings. Why? It doesn't sit right with me. I don't accept it. It's too hard. It's together. My mind doesn't comprehend it. And it could lead slowly to what? Lead slowly to leaving the folds of Islam. So the culture, and that's why here, subhanAllah, in a lot of places, the culture is slowly what? Is slowly changing. Wallahi, and I remember, subhanAllah, when we were kids, the outings that we used to have with the family, the whole family would be there. You have 60, 50 people in the park. You have the family connection, the relationship and so forth. Now, what happens now? Now the brothers, they invite each other out for lunch and each person wants to pay their own bill. Now husbands and wives are going out for lunch and they're what? They're splitting the bill. And هو شو؟ هو رجال. And هو رجال. He's a man. I'm with what? I'm with the current times. Wallahi, a father came to me, said to me, we went out and his daughter, his own daughter, and she wanted it like that, subhanAllah. My own daughter went out, we went out for lunch, for dinner. He got up and ordered his meal. رجع كذا ما لقيت, he goes, I saw my daughter get up and she's going and ordering her meal. مبسوطة, she's walking in مبسوطة. إنه I'm a, what's it called? إنه I buy my own food. I كذا. That's what the time is. That's what the time is coming to. They go shopping. Each one has their own shopping cart. Each one has their own shopping thing. He buys his shopping, she buys her shopping. He's got his milk, she's got her milk. Her milk runs out, she can't take from his milk. She has to go buy milk. That's what it's coming to. The culture is what? The culture affects the people, affects the different fabric of society, and then it becomes more accepting of what? More accepting of the outside culture that comes in. They throw us all their filth, they throw us all that which is not suitable, they throw it towards us, and then we accept it thinking that it's what? We're thinking that it's the new way of life, thinking that it's the way to be, thinking that it's kala. When the French and the English entered into the Mediterranean and the Arabian Peninsula and together, they went there, they left their poison, and they what? They left. And the poison until today is still there. In the Middle East, in Northern Africa. You go to Northern Africa. Northern Africa got hit the most, especially Morocco and those areas and those countries. They got affected so hard by the culture because they were there the longest. They were there the longest. In Algeria and so forth, different fights came up. Umar al-Mukhtar and so forth. They fought the Italians. They fought with them in Sham, in Syria, and in Lebanon. they got up and they fought against them, and this happened. Al-Jaza, they came from outside and they fought against them. A lot of areas, khalas, they accepted. But till today, the effect of their colonization is still there till today. Take Lebanon for instance. Go to Lebanon. Lebanon until today, a lot of the legislations and a lot of the rulings is still French based. It's still based upon French legislation. Still till today, it's still there. It still has an effect. And all the other countries the same. Egypt and Northern Africa and so forth. Another factor is the emergence of a new generation. New generation coming in. This new generation hasn't had any interaction with the Prophet ﷺ. Hasn't had any interaction with the Sahaba. Didn't go through any hard times. Didn't go through any hard times like the Sahaba and their children they went through. Didn't go through it. So they were brought up spoiled. They were brought up spoiled, like today. Like the generation that's coming up today. Spoiled. We think that because we didn't have all of these things when we were kids, wallahi, today I say alhamdulillah, my father raised us the way he raised us. That not everything that you ask or not everything that the child asks for is yes. Majority of the times, 9 out of 10 it was no. 9 out of 10 it was no. One time it'd say yes. I say alhamdulillah, that's how we were raised. Because the generation that's coming up now doesn't know the word no. Even if you tell him no, be like, روح بلد البحر, you tell him me no. Who you telling no to? غصب العراس, you're gonna get me what I want. The child to the what? The child to the parent. The parent tells his daughter no. The parent tells his son no. And he screams and he yells. I remember once in front of my eyes, subhanAllah, in front of my eyes, the father is going off at his daughter. Not that it's right, but the father, he's going off at his daughter, he's screaming, he's trying to scare her. The daughter's looking at him like that. When he finishes, khalasat, I go. I'm going to do what I want to do. No effect. Khalas, that's it, it's gone. It's gone. So the emergence of a new generation, and at the time of Uthmaan, as Al-Hasan al-Basri, he says, Al-Hasan al-Basri was an eyewitness on that time. He saw a lot of the things taking place. He was young. At the time of Uthmaan, when Uthmaan was killed, he was in his teenage years, Al-Hasan al-Basri. So he witnessed a lot of what was taking place. He says, and he mentions in many different narrations, that the kids, or the wealth that was coming into Medina on a weekly basis, the booty of war that's coming from the open areas and the open provinces, he goes on a weekly basis. The wealth was coming in and being distributed. The wealth was coming in, being distributed. Slaves coming in, this coming in, that coming in. And this new generation, it raised or it came up and it saw all that in front of it and it got affected by it. That's why to the extent where Uthmaan radiallahu anhu, he had to exile, he had to kick out of Medina a lot of the rich people's kids, because they started to become what? They started to become too much. Drinking, doing this, doing that in Medina. Imagine, in Medina, so he had to kick them out. He had to kick them out. And that didn't sit well with the older people in Medina. Those tribes, those gather, they didn't. So that as well gave a large effect to those people. They didn't accept the way of the previous generations. Like today, our kids don't accept the way that we used to do things, or the way that we used to practice, or the way that the kid looks at his father and says, you're too old school. Course, times have changed. And not in matters that change with time. Technology changes, of course, technology changes. Parents these days need to keep up with their children. When it comes to technology, when it comes to these matters, they need to keep up with them. If you don't keep up with them, technology can destroy your child. Access to technology can destroy them. If you're not up to date and know what's happening, know what's going on, Your child, while you're thinking, my child is righteous, is a taqi, he's doing things behind your back. Through the technology and through, so easy these days. So easy. So you need to keep up with them. Now we're talking about actual cultural matters that are related to the deen. The child no longer accepts it because he thinks that the father is what? The father is too old. They become new ways, new mentality, new outlook on life that they had came to life, and the new ways and so forth. And this brings forth what? This brings forth also a generation that is able to accept rumors and so forth about people like Uthman. And that's where the next point comes in, society's readiness to accept rumors. All of these matters, all of these things came forth with what? With the readiness of the society to accept the rumors that were placed upon Uthman. And inshallah ta'ala, in the next lesson, or in the lessons that will come, we'll go through them one by one. Everyone, all of the shubuhat, all of the doubts that they put upon Uthman, all of the things they put upon Uthman, and how all of it is refuted. All of it is refuted. The things related to him putting his family, or giving his family preference when it came to governors and so forth, giving them wealth and doing this. All of these things that they made up to spread these rumors about Uthman, to the extent where they said he was taking the money of the government of the Muslimin and giving it to his family. Look, Uthman didn't need to go take the money of the government. He was from the richest of men. His wealth was known. Small things like that. But people, they what? People, when they're already sort of, they're already, as we say in Arabic, their heart is already heated towards them. All they need is one thing, and they'll go follow you against them. One thing, they'll follow you against them. So their hearts, a lot of people, their hearts were already against him due to the fact, as we said, he kicked a lot of spoiled kids out of Medina. He done, a lot of the punishments were put upon a lot of people, and they were kicked out, they were exiled. All of this brought forth. And because he was Uthman and he wasn't Umar, if it was Umar, no one would dare what? No one would dare try and come back again. Like the man who came up, and I'll finish on this inshallah, one of the men who began the idea of not believing in divine destiny. Not believing in divine destiny. So this man was brought to Umar radiallahu anhu. The famous story. So what did Umar do? He rolled him up in a carpet, lifted him up, and started whipping him. Through the carpet, and he started bashing him. Put him down, and years later, during the time of Ali radiallahu anhu, they came to that man. Said, you are the one who began this idea, you are the one who came up with this idea, come out and be our leader. He said, no. I still feel and remember the hits from the time of Umar. And khalas, best, as they say, best at-tawbah. He will never go back to it again. And Umar was dead. But khalas, the people feed him. Uthman radiallahu anhu was different. His character was different. His approach was different. And that's normal. He was a different type of person. The angels would get shy from Uthman. That's how much haya he had. That's how much shyness he had. The angels would get shy from Uthman radiallahu anhu. So his character was completely different. And people take advantage of that. People see that you're lenient. People see that you're easy or merciful. And they try to take advantage of it. Now Uthman, he was merciful in the beginning. And then he started to become a bit harsher on them. He started to become a bit more stern upon them. But when he did so, they used that against him, radiallahu anhu. And that's how the rumors began. Inshallah, next week we'll speak about who began the actual plot. Abdullah bin Saba, la'anahullah. How he began it, the different provinces that were around, and where it came up from, how it all took place. Very important for us to know this, the history of our khulafa, the history of our sahaba radiallahu anhu, the history of Islam, the true history, because history these days, especially the history of the Muslimin, has been what? Has been tampered with, has been changed. People are changing it. People are using it against, or trying to use it against the Muslimin, saying that the Muslimin, oh, the history is what? Oh, the history is bad. Oh, the history is full of this and full of that. To hide their own what? To hide their own history. To hide their own history that they have done. So it's very important. As I said, inshallah, next week we'll begin with the actual important points. One of the things, as we mentioned, that Uthman coming after Umar was a big effect, a big change. Umar, his way of rule, and then Uthman, that has a big change. The major Sahaba, one of the things Umar radiallahu anhu had, he didn't allow the major Sahaba to leave Medina. He kept them in Medina. Uthman, he allowed them. And that also was a reason for these matters. And we'll continue with that next week, inshallah ta'ala. Subhanak Allahumma bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk, wa jazakum Allahu khairan.
I wanna be in Jannah, 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 Jannah. Every Muslim dreams to be up in Jannah, 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 Jannah. A pious person's destiny. Inshallah in Jannah, 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 Jannah.